as we understand and know what truth really is. And by definition, Torah, Yeshua are the truth. Now, let's continue. Beware Hasatan the deceiver. Remember, we were talking about two kingdoms here. But I want us to make an important note. Please note, however, that just because there are only two kingdoms doesn't mean that they have equal power or equal authority. There is nothing equal about them. There is no dualism in this universe. There is only Elohim, and He is its absolute sovereign. Hasatan wants us to believe, however, that his kingdom is not only equal to, but also greater than that of Elohim. We have many examples of this, unfortunately, in Scripture, but the good news is because we have it as examples, we know with confidence that this is what the enemy is trying to do. Adam and Chava had to deal with this in Genesis and Bereshit chapter 3 and in verse 5. What was it that the deceiver had basically offered them that caused all the trouble? He basically was trying to convince them that his kingdom was equal to, or self-sovereignty as a kingdom would be equal to or greater than that of Yahweh, that of the Almighty. In Bereshit chapter 3 and verse 5, he says, the enemy's talking here, and he says, for Elohim knows that in the day that you eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, that you eat of it, your eyes shall be opened, and you shall be like him, knowing good and evil. See, he's trying to create an equal signs here. If you eat this fruit, you'll be equal to Elohim. What did I say previously? There's nothing equal about these two kingdoms. There is no dualism. There is the false pretender kingdom of the enemy and the true and only kingdom of the Almighty. You know, Yeshua in the wilderness is given the same type of, conversation in a sense from the enemy as was given to Adam and Chava. In Matthew chapter 4, let's turn there, Matthew chapter 4 and in verse 8. And again, the devil took him up on a very high mountain. This is the devil taking Yeshua up on a high mountain. And he showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their glory. And he said to him, all these I shall give you if you fall down and worship me. So what exactly is Hasatan saying here? He's saying, I have the power. I have the authority. I am equal to the Almighty. I can give you power and kingdoms. See, this is the temptation that he's thinking he's giving to Yeshua, which obviously wasn't a very tough temptation for him to just say, I don't think so. Because then Yeshua says, go, Satan, for it is written, you shall worship Yahweh your Elohim, and him alone you shall serve. And the devil left him. So this was the end of the battle. The last straw-ditch effort that the enemy had was to try to offer sovereignty, self-sovereignty, a choice to change kingdoms. And Yeshua said, I'm of the one and only true kingdom. I serve the Father. Now we can see by these examples, okay, that if we think about today's world and what's going on in the world, we can see examples of this mindset today. We see many in the churches running around trying to save everyone as if there is a contest between Yahweh and Hasatan. If this were true, an honest look at the world, I think would be, if we're being honest, we definitely would have to believe that Yahweh was losing and losing badly at that. See, there's no contest going on here. We don't have to go out there and quote-unquote save souls. The Father is going to take care of this exactly how He's always planned to take care of it, and He doesn't necessarily need you and me to run around trying to save everybody. It's being made to seem like when you listen to some of these Sunday preachers, how they brag about, last year we saved thousands of souls, as if there was a scoreboard and a contest going on here. Well, there is no contest. There's one true kingdom and one false kingdom, and the false kingdom only thinks it has power and authority, and the true kingdom has it all and is the only truth. So knowing that there are two kingdoms, my encouragement to you is to choose your citizenship wisely. It is very important to note that the kingdom of this world does exist and possesses a lot of power. It does exist, and it does possess a lot of power. It's power that is wielded relentlessly by its king, Hasatan, to control and influence its citizens and vie for our allegiance. You are a citizen of one kingdom or the other. There is no middle ground. Now, just because I say that it has power and lots of it doesn't mean that it's equal to, in any way, shape, or form, the kingdom of the Almighty. But it is powerful nonetheless. It has the power to deceive, if possible, the elect. We have that in Scripture. It has the power to lead you down the path that leads to the second death, from which there is no coming back. That's why I say to you, you are a citizen of one kingdom or the other, and there is no middle ground, so choose your citizenship wisely. Matthew 6 and in verse 24. Let's read there. Matthew 6:24. No one is able to serve two masters, for either he shall hate the one and love the other, or else he shall cleave to the one and despise the other. You are not able to serve Elohim and Mammon. So here again is a verse to back up what I was just saying. You are going to only be able to serve one. You can't serve two. You can only serve one. Which is why those who are out there serving the one hate us for serving the other. That is why we're persecuted. That's why we're not understood. That's why we have verses that say the world did not know him, and so therefore the world doesn't know us. What is him? He is the truth. He is Yeshua. He is the Torah. The world doesn't get it. We're supposed to get it. Romans chapter 6 and in verse 16. Romans chapter 6 and in verse 16. Do you not note that to whom you present yourselves servants for obedience, you are servants of the one whom you obey, whether of sin to death or of obedience to righteousness? But thanks to Elohim that you are servants of sin, that when you were servants of sin, yet you obeyed from the heart that form of teaching to which you were entrusted, and having been set free from sin, you became servants of righteousness. But notice in verse 16 again, do you not know that to whom you present yourselves servants for obedience, you are servants of the one whom you obey, whether sin to death or obedience to righteousness? There are two kingdoms. One leaves you in a state of tahor, or cleanliness, where you can approach. The other leaves you in a state of unclean, tamei, where you cannot approach the Almighty. And so if you're finding yourself struggling in your approaching of the Almighty, you feel like your prayers are just hitting the ceiling, if you feel like you're disconnected, there may be a sin issue that needs to be rooted out. There may be something that has rendered you tamei that needs to be rooted out. We're going to talk more about examining yourself in a little bit. Ephesians chapter 2 and verse 19. Let's talk a little bit more about citizenship here. Ephesians chapter 2 and in verse 19. Remember, there's two kingdoms and you need to choose your citizenship wisely. Verse 19, so then you are no longer strangers and foreigners, but fellow citizens with the set-apart ones, and members of the household of Elohim, having been built upon the foundation of the emissaries and prophets, Yeshua Messiah himself being chief cornerstone, in whom all the building, being joined together, grows into a set-apart dwelling place in Yahweh, in whom you also are being built together into a dwelling of the Elohim in the Spirit. Now, we're no longer strangers. We're no longer foreigners, but fellow citizens, if we choose to be. This doesn't happen by default. It doesn't happen because you made an altar call. It doesn't happen because you declared a name. It happens because you make a citizenship choice. Just like Ruth did. What did Ruth do? She was a Moabitess. Moabites were not on the well-liked list, according to Scripture. The Ammonites and the Moabites were not to come into the assembly unto the 10th generation. Yet Ruth is in the lineage of Messiah, and it's less than 10 generations. How could that be? Because we know in Ruth, it says that she said to Naomi, she said, your people will be my people, your Elohim, my Elohim, your ways, my ways. I'm going to follow along and change my citizenship. Praise Yahweh that when you change your citizenship, it matters not what you were before. Your sin is now taken away from you as far as the east is from the west. So it's a citizenship choice, and we always have to remember that. That's why there's so many verses that deal with circumcision versus the uncircumcised, the Jew or Greek, the male or female, all of that stuff. It's just trying to make the point that it doesn't matter how you were born or what you started out as. What matters is the citizenship decision that you make, which is evidenced by the walk that you walk. That's why we have Deuteronomy 8:2, where it says that Yahweh led them through the desert the 40 years to test them, to prove them, to see whether it was in their heart to keep the commandments or not. And that's what was important. Remember, that whole verse is dealing with the mixed multitude that came out of Egypt. And by the time we got out of Egypt and you get to the promised land, we get to the Jordan, 40 years later, we find that they're crossing all as Israelites, that those who had made the citizenship choice were now part of Israel. So this is all about citizenship.